Hello there and welcome to episode 5 of Nothing Else Mattress, the music podcast that sets out to establish what the 100 greatest albums are. We've released review 20 so far, and at the moment we're 50-50. So from the Rolling Stones list, we're 10 in and 10 out. So pretty interesting. And we've obviously got another 5 to review tonight. But before we get into them, just say hello to the guys that are on tonight. So we have George. Hi, mate.
Get up, it.
Lisa. Hello there. How you doing?
Hi.
Hi. And John.
Get up, you.
Get up, you. That's a new catchword, is it? Lisa, do you want to say yours again? No?
No, because my jumper says it all.
It says get up, you. Right.
Thank
you.
We are reviewing the Sex Pistols, are we not?
So,
it really is,
yeah.
Since I'm feeling the love
You
from
don't get the memo, guys, no.
Since I'm feeling the love from the team tonight, I think I do have to just make a little apology on behalf of the podcast researcher,
long overdue,
who obviously apologises profusely for the error in reviewing the wrong album on a previous podcast. It's fair to say, like Mr. Lineker, it was a matter that got out of hand, and we've had to find a way to get some closure on that one. So I can assure you, he has been disciplined, and it won't happen again. They won't see that on Spotify, George. You're right. You're right.
I got a significant pay rise.
You did, absolutely. I'm going to send you some wine down, Lisa. That'll be the apology. So fingers crossed there won't be any more, but I'm sure there will be. So got 5 more tonight to get stuck into. So the first one we're going to do is Imagine by John Lennon. Hey. I'm just going to keep it.
I know that one.
I'm going to keep it, Lisa, because if we vote it in, I've got a review already sorted.
Oh, it was a shit review because you put me on first and I was wittering.
So we're starting off with a bang tonight for sure. So number 80 on the Rolling Stones list is the Sex Pistols. Never mind the bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. Comments from Rolling Stone, quote, "If the sessions had gone the way I wanted, it would have been unlistenable for most people," Johnny Rotten said. "I guess it's the very nature of music. If you want people to listen, you're going to have to compromise. But if you heard it that way at the time, the Pistols' only studio album sounds like a rejection of everything rock and roll and the world itself had to offer. True, the music was less shocking than Rotten himself, who sang about abortions, anarchy and hatred on Bodies and Anarchy in the UK. But Never Mind the Bollocks is the Sermon on the Mount of UK punk, and its echoes are everywhere." So that's Rolling Stones summary. So who wants to jump off with the Sex Pistols? George.
I'll go.
That with the marching in the background just to introduce it. That would have given it
the jackboots.
The jackboots, yep.
Yeah, exactly. I've got my. I could have just put these on. I've got a pair of them right here.
I'm sure John has as well.
Yeah.
No,
it's.
What do we think?
I'm going back. My first experience of punk were actually, I think it might have been even the Sex Pistols. I don't know. It was Candle Rigs in 1977, I think it was. And my mum and I were uptown. She was taking me up one evening to Alan Glen's school, which used to be in the centre of Glasgow, to talk about going away on a camping trip. And there was a punk gig in Candle Rigs that night, and there was cops and punks, and they were all fighting with each other, and it was like terrifying, but it was quite exhilarating. So I never really get into punk until, a wee bit later on, because I was still only about 10, 11 years old at the time. But I probably get into it more when I was about 13 or 14. And I was really, I was just absorbing every type of music. I'd a couple of their singles before I had, Never Mind the Bollocks. But when I got Never Mind the Bollocks and listening back to it now, it's fucking unreal. It doesn't sound like an album from 50 years ago. It's stunning stuff. There's 4 absolute top class era defining tunes on it. God Save the Queen, Pretty Vacant, Holidays in the Sun, and Anarchies in the UK. And it shows them to be what I think at the time, the anti-ABBA. You know, they were the absolute fucking anti-ABBA. So it was, nothing else was like the Sex Pistols back then. Even the Clash were a lot more, worldly and wordy. But there was a snarl about the Sex Pistols and about never mind the bollocks. If you listen to Bodies, and I've listened to it a couple of times this week, I hadn't heard it for a couple of decades. In this form, I can't imagine a more disturbing song released by a major record label. The lyrics are absolutely brutal. And an old friend of mine used to play it. We had in my old work with directors, and they did have directors' meetings in the Works bar, and we had a Works jukebox. And my friend Neil Sugden, so I hope you're watching this, Neil, used to go in and put Bodies on, so we'd play through the bar, and it was that brilliant fucking line about fuck this and fuck that, fucking Holly, a fucking brat. And they would end up going up to the barman saying, "You need to turn that down, turn it off," and stuff like that. So it's the lyrics are phenomenal. The snarl is just incredible. Steve Jones, the guitar player's playing, some of the best rhythm guitar I think I've ever heard. It's well recorded, so tight. So if this is sort of throwaway stuff, it doesn't sound like it. It was recorded by Bill Price and Chris Thomas, who produced it for Virgin after it had been passed about like a scud book, around the record labels.
It was.
But it's incredible. It really, really stands up. There's a couple of tunes that are, you would say are maybe fillers, but
not many, I don't think.
No many. I would say it was an absolute certainty to go into the top 100. It should be even far higher than 80 in my opinion. So, but going back to the actual technical side of it, any guitar playing that they play guitar solos in middle eights, that's something. It's a wee thing, but I've always loved that. Great rhythm guitar, great guitar solos in the middle eights, and some of the best and most prescient lyrics you'll ever hear on any albums. There is no future in England's dreaming. We're still talking about that nearly 50 years later. Phenomenal stuff.
I think the problem for that album was the circus that surrounded it at the time, because McLaren, Westwood, the Sex Shop, McLaren said, it was his thing, it was his kind of baby, and he said, "Oh, none of them, they can't play." But that was all about his own PR. That must have been surely about his own ego, that he could create something from nothing. But in fact, as you said, the guitar playing is immense.
That plays brilliant. It's some of the best rhythm guitar playing.
The drums are the heartbeat of the whole album. The drums and the guitar provide the perfect steady engine room for Lydon's psychotic, kind of manic, screeching. But I mean, he's unique in himself.
Totally.
Absolutely incredible front man. It was just something completely different, and it was a huge B-sign to that. You said it was anti-ABBA. They were obviously maybe a bit more concerned about being anti-establishment.
Yeah, and I it had a fairly difficult birth. I think it would come out in October 77, but the majority of the records had been written and recorded thick end of a year earlier than that, and that was why Matlock, one of the reasons he left the band was that things weren't really sort of moving on, and all those big personalities and McLaren that you mentioned, and the record label stuff, George. And so you actually look back now and think, well, for its only studio album, it sort of got through a lot of barriers to get out, and then you look at it 50 years down the line. The thing I was amazed about was that it spent 48 weeks in the chart, which at the time, which for a sort of punk album, you're going, even the greatest punk guys kind of, they come out and had a big bang, and then they kind of went away again a bit, and it obviously had that longevity at the time. So the songs must have been pretty good.
But I think it's a bit ridiculous. It's number 80. I mean, this is
We'll fix
this
that,
is-
John, mate. We'll fix that. Yeah.
minimum top 20. Absolutely is. I mean, you know, if you think about it, it is a truly groundbreaking album, and there's not too many albums you can say that about. It wasn't even the first punk album. The Damned beat them to that, and the Ramones beat them to that. But you know, one studio album, and what a legacy. You know, it's had, as you say, 50 odd years. And I think they were looked on about these sort of street urchins, not that clever, but boy, could they play. I mean, I think Matlock only plays on one song on the finished recording, on Anarchy. All these bass lines were done by Steve Jones, who's a cracking player. Really, really good. Just incredible. I think they did get Sid Vicious to do bass for two of the songs, but it was that tour that he just pulled it. He pulled it. Steve Jones did them all. So
yeah, I think they double tracked and stuff, didn't it? To just kind of overdub them, you know. So
I mean, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword as well. I mean, it is a truly groundbreaking album, but I think just that punk explosion did then lead to some truly awful punk bands coming on the scene, you know, and kind of thinking you've got to have this punk identikit look, you know, the Mohican and the, you know, piercings all over the place, and you know, the kind of tartan trousers, and that's just a small party punk. But I mean, the album itself is just absolutely incredible, and just that journey, you know, when you say from when it was recorded to when it was released. I mean, we're on 3 different record labels during that period of time, and it's just an absolute circus. But you know, you read back in it and you think that must have been incredible to be right in the heart of that storm at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so
I don't know if any of you guys have seen the Pistol program on Disney. The 4 or 5 part series on the Sex Pistols, the dramatisation. I thought it was excellent. I thought really enjoyed it. It put a lot of flesh in the bones for me, and it obviously with things like Bodies, it gave quite a disturbing account of the genesis of that tune. So yeah, I'd urge anyone who's interested in finding out more about the Sex Pistols to listen to Never Mind the Bollocks and watch Pistol, because it will open your eyes a wee bit.
Yeah,
it was really, I thought it was really well done, really authentic.
Yeah,
you know, they really put effort into making it as authentic as possible. And I remember seeing Danny Boyle getting interviewed about it, and one of the actors, young actors, can't remember, I think it was the guy who played Johnny Rotten, and they actually had to teach them how to dial an old phone.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, what is it?
Yeah,
it's a phone. That's not a phone, right? So they're like, no, this is a phone, and to show them how to, you know, pick it up and put the handle down and stuff like that. It was pretty funny. But no, cracking album. And of course, Nirvana's Nevermind. You think about the title, Nevermind is basically taken from Never Mind the Bollocks. That's where they got the inspiration for.
Oh, really?
And I think, and that truly pissed Johnny Rotten off when he found that out. So I'm up for that as well.
Well, he's a legendary contrarian. He's just one of those guys that, you know, if he won 6 million in the lottery, he'd want 7. You know.
Yeah, I can't believe it's not butter, right?
Yeah,
I know. And I think, I mean, the kind of myths around them are huge, but it was quite interesting, George. I would go along with what you said there. I mean, I've heard the song so many times, but it's been a while since I went back and played the album. And sat down and listened to it, you know. And
you know, when I called him the anti-ABBA, I've just realised that Johnny Rotten, as John Lydon, is now, I think he applied to be the Irish entrant in the Eurovision contest, which is completes the circle, you know, back to from anti-ABBA to Eurovision. So
forgotten about that. God, it was recently as well.
But they were into all the. I mean, it was a myth, this whole, you know, Year Zero and stuff from a musical perspective, because they loved some of the disco and the soul, and they used to go to the clubs and all that down in Bermondsey and all that part of London. So yeah, I think it was more the attitude that that changed and that kind of came through in the music, and that then did have an impact. But as you say, George, it could be the Stooges or the Ramones or a bit of New York Dolls, or, you know, a lot of that guitar sound had happened before. It was more the attitude, I think, that came on top of that made them different. And the cover, of course, the album cover was you couldn't. I remember seeing it in record shops and stuff, and it get banned, didn't it? And then
it's so bright and bold. Jamie Reed's design, it's really striking, iconic.
They were a particularly British brand of punk, though, weren't they? I mean, they were nothing like the Ramones at all.
No.
But it was that real attitude, and with the background of unemployment and, you know, no future, you know, it just really, it was just really important at the time, and just storm onto the scene, and was indicative as well what the youth felt at the time.
Yeah, didn't he realise there was a different sleeve for America as well compared to the UK one, different colour scheme.
Different colour.
Yeah. So,
and also there was on that point, John, I think they were very close to not being allowed to call it that in America, the bollocks word, and there was a whole debate about it. So McLaren was talking to, I think it must have been Rotten, and he said, "I've got a problem with this here," and he says, "Well, it's fine, because in America the word they use for bollocks is stones. So we just call it, never mind the Stones. Here's the Sex Pistols." And McLaren says, "We can't do that. I'll literally get hung, you know." So whatever way they went, there was always an angle to it, wasn't there? Which
did Richard Branson the rescue with that one, and some sort of
somebody got arrested, didn't they, or something? One of the record store guys in Nottingham, I think it was, got arrested. So that was a bit of a PR stunt, I think. But they liked her PR. We literally could talk about this one all night. And I
know, I was going to say, we're going to be here all night.
Isn't it wonderful just to have something that, a bit like Hunky Dory maybe, where we all kind of went, yeah, it's absolutely on and should be higher, I guess. So it's, it's nice that it's one that's dead simple. But if there's any other sort of last minute recollections or reflections on it, because I've got one quote here that I dug out, but if you get any others, then feel free to chuck them in.
The only one for me is, I think when they were recording it, and Sid Vicious was in the band at this point, Queen were in the next studio. I think Sid Vicious went in and tried to have a go at Freddie Mercury, trying to play the big lad, and Freddie's just gone back to him, "Oh, aren't you Simon Ferocious?"
I read that, and it's really funny. And I think they were basically like crawling in and out the studio as Queen were recording, and lying under the piano and stuff like that. And they basically ended up having to sort of throw them out. But of course, they were all recording at the same time. And you mentioned about the guitars and stuff, George, and Chris Thomas, it was on it. I think was on, I don't know if it was Dark Side of the Moon or Wish You Were Here. He was on one of those, and he said that they spent longer on the guitars on the bollocks than the guys did on the Pink Floyd album. Yeah,
it was also, I think Chris Thomas was the first choice for bass for Jimi Hendrix, for the Jimi Hendrix Experience. He was the guy who wanted to first. I had what's his name, Noel Redding.
Oh, right, okay, didn't know that.
So he wanted Chris Thomas first, so he had these rock chops anyway. So, but he was involved in so many great albums and great recordings back then. They hired the right guys. Him and Bill Price were just the right guys for the job.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that it has stood the test of time, because there was another story, wasn't there, that McLaren released or took the demos from the time, and that subsequently started doing stuff on the black market. I think was it Spunk, I think that the album was, and that was very much that kind of live one take Pistols, which I'm sure was amazing, certainly to watch. But probably if it had sounded like that now, it might have aged a bit less well than it has done, I think.
Well, those 4 singles that I mentioned early on, every single one of them could have been recorded and released yesterday. They still sound so fresh and vibrant.
Yeah, Noel Gallagher's one of the things I picked up was he says that those first 4 singles versus anyone ever, that's never be beaten.
I'd put their sort of their fillers against anything Oasis have ever done.
Oh yeah, that's what he said, including them. You know, he wasn't talking them up at all. He just says they were different world altogether. So
The sad thing is, though, at the end of the day, that it was like what was a catalyst for a generation was basically at the end of their career.
Yeah, their journey. Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn Matlock said that the
actually had already happened. You know, it just so happened that they made that album, and thank fuck they did.
Matlock says that the band had split up before they'd released a single. Really, you know, so all the heavy lifting was done early on, and by the time they got to record, there was already all the factions in the band and all the stuff that subsequently came out. So,
I mean, they actually asked Matlock to go back and record the album.
Right, yeah, they did.
But he told them where to go.
And Stephen's not on, so but I will say on behalf of Stephen,
he was really looking forward to reviewing that album.
He loves this album, right? Absolutely loves it. Proper slam dunk for Stephen, and as you know, he's also a big Jam fan. So both myself and Stephen call out that the Holiday in the Sun riff is In the City by the Jam, which came out about 4 months before it, because that was the only single. I think they only wrote 2 songs, didn't they? Sort of later on, and that was one of them. And that was after In the City. So I'm sure Weller's got something to say about that. Twitter was 87%, and as you say, George, who's the other 13%? The 13% that I did. So
the intro for Holidays in the Sun, I think you might see that again. It would be pretty appropriate for
here.
So Al Braverman walking up to their podium.
Exactly, timely stuff.
I'm sure we'll revisit that one. So we're all in, guys. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, yeah, love that one, and I'm sure we'll get to kind of redo them all on the ratings later on. I'm sure we'll manage to get that one nudged up a bit. Okay, so that was Sex Pistols. 79 on the list is Frank Ocean, Blonde. So Frank Ocean turned the release of Blonde into a daring aesthetic stunt in itself. After years of high expectations after Channel Orange, his first album, he fulfilled his Def Jam contract with the visual project Endless, but then within hours he released his own album Blonde. It's a boldly personal statement full of layered harmonies as Ocean mutates his voice to match every mood. The songs were so nakedly intimate it felt like a post-hip-hop Pet Sounds in the spirit of Beyonce and Elliott Smith. Ivy is his most deeply melancholic confession. Ocean mourns a lost love over a distorted guitar, lamenting, "We'll never be those kids again." Frank Ocean, Blonde. So, a bit different from the Pistols. John, what's your take, mate?
Oh, I'd never heard of Frank Ocean, I must admit, before this.
Billy's boy.
Yeah. Is he? No, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not.
My guy, come on.
No idea.
Yeah. No. So I think he's actually named after Frank Sinatra in Ocean's 11.
That's right. Yeah.
That's where he takes his name from.
Indeed. Well
done. So yeah, I mean it's okay. I really couldn't find the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds in this album, although it's supposedly influenced there. I thought it was quite a free album, quite sparse, quite minimalistic, not over expansive. I thought it was really interesting. He's released it a day after his final contractual album with Def Jam. So he's clearly making a point there. But again, you know, an album for me, it's probably about 12 songs, 45 minutes is ideal. This one's 17 songs in an hour. And that's, again, felt there was quite a lot in there that probably could have been taken out, shall we say, make it a better album.
Were you finding the music interesting, John? Was there stuff in there that you quite liked?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of songs that I kind of quite liked, and I just thought it was okay. I wasn't blown away with it. And again, I was sort of having a look at the album. 47 different musicians are on it. I mean, what's going on? I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I know everybody. They're contributing all that sort of stuff, but it's too much. And one of them is a certain Derek Dick, aka Fish, from Marillion.
Didn't know that.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he plays guitar in one of the songs.
I
Wow.
did not know that.
Yeah.
You'd love to
So
know
there
how
you
did
go.
that come about? Eh?
Yeah, who
Yeah,
knows?
who knows?
Well, what-
Axe for hire.
Oh,
One
John,
of
what
the-
would we do without you? We wouldn't know these things.
No.
one of the song that ends the album was actually co-credited to the Gang of Four.
Yeah,
All right.
Future
Yeah.
of Free. Yeah.
That's
All
credited
9
to
minutes of it.
Frank Ocean and the Gang of Four.
So
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
I think he actually name checks them, doesn't he? So I don't quite know all the story behind it, but
Yeah,
they get a full credit, absolutely. Yeah, and the reason I asked that, John, was that I absolutely had that initial thought on it. I put it on and I thought, and sort of Drake
Well-
memories and stuff come flooding back and whatever. But if I'm being honest with you, I thought there was more in it than Drake, and I think he's probably quite a clever guy. I think he's challenging himself to do things that are a bit different to what the other kind of guys in that area of the. To my ears, I'm not particularly expert on this one, and I also liked some of the sampling that he was doing. I thought that was quite clever. I also liked the fact that one or two of the songs are very minimalistic, kind of sparse, basic acoustic guitar and stuff like that, which quite unusual for that kind of new soul type stuff to be doing that. But
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely it's not as cliched as some of those earlier albums. I think we've talked about, and he's definitely doing his own thing. Fish appears in the second track, Ivy.
I quite like that one actually.
Yeah, yeah.
That'll be my prog rock. Love coming back in there. See, I didn't know that.
Clearly.
I mean, it's his second studio album, so his first one actually, Channel Orange, is 148 on the list. So there's a bit of love for him on this thing. He's only done 2, and he's got one just outside the 100 and one in the 100. So I know we talk a lot about this sort of Americanization of it, but there obviously is some sort of pure respect there for what he's doing. To get both of them called out, I think, on the list, which is quite interesting.
That's right. I mean, I think previously
John.
he's. Yeah, I was just going to say he's also, I think, previously written for the likes of Justin Bieber and Beyonce. So he's certainly got a reputation, hasn't he? So he's definitely doing something right.
He got a very positive accolade from John Savage. The England Dreaming journalist and stuff. Very positive. Saying he was a kind of bit of a next gen of music. Which, as I say, there's probably a wee bit more in him. Interestingly, he's not done a lot really since then. He's done a bit. The odd song. He's done some producing and stuff, but he's not really been doing a lot of releasing. A bit like, was it Missy Elliott? I think that we talked about her, and then I think she had quite a big gap. I think, didn't she, after she released a couple of albums? So, but yeah.
I was just going to say that I think we possibly all went into it with a bit of the same attitude, which obviously isn't a good thing because maybe it's our age, but I wasn't very familiar with him at all. So I think I had that negative kind of attitude already, which is bad. I know that we should be open to everything. So I've got to confess that I listened to it for the first time, and I think I messaged George and said, Jesus, suffering Christ. I've got this for 3 weeks. But however, no, do you know what? I've kept listening to it, and I have to say that with each listen, I'm not saying it's my kind of music and it's something that I'm going to listen to all the time, but I was quite intrigued by it. I thought it was quite experimental in terms of, the track lengths could vary from usually over a minute to 5 minutes to 9 minutes on the final track. And just when you're trying to get into one, it just finishes and he moves on to the next. So I felt as if I was in this kind of constant dreamlike state, where I was drifting in and out of different sounds, and some are more minimal than others. Sometimes there's no drums. I don't know. The themes seem to be generally very kind of nostalgic, and of course what was the tracks? Is it solo?
Mm-hmm.
He has, is it Andre?
Andre 3000, yeah.
Yeah, he's the guest vocalist on that, and he does sort of he's bemoaning the fact that you know, he's been rapping for 20 years and having a wee go at guys that don't write their own stuff. Looking at you, Drake. And then the final song, he uses actual interviews from his little brother, you know, so it's very much, you know, nostalgic, looking back in time. Actually, you know, his brother speaking, there's lots of distortion there, and then it just finishes, and you know that time has moved on. I thought it was interesting. I don't know how often I would listen to it again, but I do think he's got a certain intelligence about him.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. George?
Yeah, like the rest of you guys, it was quite surprising for me. When Lisa messaged me and went, "Oh, fucking Frank Ocean," I thought, "Oh no, it's another Drake." So I left it to the end. I only listened to it today for the first time, so I hadn't really spent any time listening to it. You know, and again, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I really should jump more into ones that I'm less comfortable with, and I'm glad I did. I was really enjoying it. I expected to dislike it, and I found myself being drawn in. And as Lisa said, it was a really appealing narcoleptic quality to it. I feel that it was almost like a dreamlike state, very experimental. I liked the fella's voice. I liked some of the lyrical ideas, the, you know, very mournful, loss related. It reminded me a lot of Prince's experimental stuff. When Prince started working with the auto-tune as it was then, it would have been called something else. You know, pitch tuning on his voice, "If I Was Your Girlfriend," and things like that. That kind of vibe for me, you know, that made it quite appealing. I liked his use of classic, you know, pop classic songs like "Here, There and Everywhere" was used in one of them. He really took those melodies and blended them really well with what he was attempting. And the other one was Baccarat and David's "Close to You." So I thought, I really like what you're doing. You're just, you know, dropping in these little reminders that you're aware of, you know, your place in pop heritage. Yeah, it was very, very different to what I was expecting. It was nothing like Drake.
It wasn't Drake.
No, it wasn't Drake, so that's a big fucking thumbs up.
Poor Drake.
And no, fuck Drake. No, I don't mean that on a personal level, Drake. If you're watching.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Really kick my ass, right? But this was far more interesting than a lot of albums of modern times in those genres. It was very a lot more appealing than I thought it would be, and I will go back and have a wee listen to it again, second.
I agree, George. I feel that there's an aesthetic about it that is going to make me go back and like you, I probably listened to it today, although I did listen to it right at the beginning, but I didn't give it long enough. I listened to this helium-induced intro, the first that really put me off. So I like that. I like that. I'm not into that. So I kept listening to the other albums and then putting this off, and I thought, right, I really need to give this a chance. And then I thought, I wish I'd spent more time in this. So I think I'll go back to it. I will go back to it just out of interest purely.
I think it's a very personal album.
Yeah.
You know, he's really stamped his own authority on it. You know, some of those other albums you see, it's almost they're just dotting the numbers, whereas this, I think he's really thought about, you know, what he's trying to do and bring his own style to it. So for that, he's definitely got to be applauded.
Yeah, there's a lot in here. The quick question for you before we move on, and this is a kind of what if, I guess, but if we were doing this in, say, 20 years' time, do you think this is the kind of album that could have a chance for us to put it on the 100. So if you think about some of these great hip hop stroke soul albums that have got a slightly longer dated, you know, I think we've got a bit of love for quite a lot of those. So I just wonder if this is just a timing thing. It's just too new for us to be able to have time to appreciate it.
It's a good
Or maybe
point.
we're old, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we won't be here, but I think the principle, I think, you know, Missy Elliott was 97, I think. So
Yeah,
you'd
that's
imagine this has come out in
25
97 or whatever. I wonder what we'd be saying about it, you know.
I think it's probably an album. I think that from what I hear from everybody else, it's one of these albums. I think you'd probably have to play it a good few times to really get under its skin a little bit and know it.
So I'll get a diary date for, what is that? 2043, is that right? Yeah. Goodness me.
I'll ask my carers if it's okay if I can come on that night.
I promise that.
I'm going to a Metallica gig that night. Sorry, can't make it.
John,
so, yeah, so I think we've done that one to death. So the only other PS I had to all that was, I say it was very popular, especially in America. And obviously it get sort of dropped, as they say. So it's 65 million streams in the first, I can't remember, I think it was first 3 months or 4 months.
But that doesn't mean shit though, mate. Let's be honest about it. It doesn't mean fuck, right? Streams don't count. See when somebody has to actually get off their fucking arse, off their couch, put their jacket on, put their shoes on, go outside, wait for a fucking bus, jump on that bus into town, take their money, wait the queue, and buy the fucking record. If 65 billion of them, yeah, it sort of counts a wee bit better. 65 million streams doesn't matter a fuck, right?
I was only going to say...
He'll get about 12 grand out of it anyway, so it's pointless bringing the streams argument to the table. I was going to say to you was that it was very popular, and the only person that was more popular in 2016 was Drake. That was all I was going to say on the streams. And also, I think you can buy albums online, George. I think that's a thing now, mate.
George.
I think we can... No.
Nobody buys albums. They just press Spotify. Oh, fuck, let's...
No, we don't. No, big album, man.
Fucking shite, honestly.
So, quick round the room then.
Bring streams into this conversation. It counts for nothing.
All right, is that a rule now?
That is in my book. Yeah.
Okay,
sorry.
I'm fine about that.
As George's weekly rant over.
That's okay. No, we wouldn't be the same, mate, without it. So, Frank Ocean, in and out. George.
I'm going to put it in. Just
for the hell of it.
No, because it surprised me every time I heard another track. It surprised me, and then I was like, I want to hear this again. It made me want to hear it again. Whether it's top 100 of all time, I couldn't say for certain, but I'm willing to go with it just to see where it takes me.
Okay, you're in, Lisa.
I'm going to go with George here actually, because I just wasn't expecting to react the way that I reacted to it, and maybe a wee bit about what you said as well, that maybe in the future this is a record that might just become something that people do regard as top. It's just so different, and I feel as if I've got a lot more to learn from it as well. And I think that we are very guilty of, obviously all music it's subjective, it's always going to be subjective, but I feel as if we are very heavily weighted towards our own culture, what we are used to listening to, what we've been brought up with, and all the rest of it. And this is quite alien to me. I won't speak for you guys. But having said that, I'm really quite intrigued by it and intend to listen to it again.
Okay, so yes, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. John?
Yeah, I'm probably still 50-50, but the one thing that will swing it for me is the fact that Derek Dick's on it. So I think that alone.
Derek Dick.
I'll give it a pass.
It's got a Beatles sample on. I mean, come on, right. Come on. Yeah, let's. I would tend to go along with it as well. I think it was You know, so far, what's that, 20 odd albums reviewed, and there's been at least 3 or 4 of them that I've genuinely listened to and went, wow, I just didn't expect that. And this was one of them. So,
but that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah. I'm sure there's a few more. Okay, excellent. That's put.
I'm just going to be honest and say I just wanted to get up, Drake, but you know.
I'll tell you, it'll cheer up our Twitter guys who were 83% no. You'll be pleased to know. But I'm sure have never listened to it. They never listened to it, right?
And that's the thing. I would have been an absolute no before I heard that. My preconceived ideas about Frank Ocean would have said no until I listened to it. So 83% of Twitter needs to get its finger out and listen.
Absolutely, mate. Along with the other 17% that idiots.
Right. As well.
And we've got Billy to come, I'm sure. Yeah.
You might have been thinking about Billy Ocean. You don't know. Easy done.
Okay, so we're doing well tonight. It's 2 for 2. Must be going soft. 78 is Elvis Presley, The Sun Sessions. Okay, so on July 5th, 54, at Sun Studios in Memphis, Elvis Presley, guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black were horsing around with That's All Right, a tune by bluesman Arthur Crudup, when producer Sam Phillips stopped him and asked, "What are you doing?" "We don't know," they said. Phillips told him to back up and do it again. Bridging black and white, country and blues, Presley's sound was playful and revolutionary, charged by a spontaneity and freedom that changed the world. He released 4 more singles in Sun, including definitive reinventions of Good Rockin' Tonight and Mystery Train, before moving on to Immortality at RCA. They're all on here on a collection that serves as well as anything out there as a definitive chronicle of the birth of rock and roll. Elvis Presley, The Sun Sessions. So the interesting one, 54-55, didn't get released until 76. So it's got a slightly different sort of landing to the others. Who wants to go first? John,
you go. You're the
Rockabilly
expert.
King.
Yeah, right. So I love it, right? I mean, purest, rawest rockabilly going. That's All Right, Mama. Blue Moon of Kentucky, absolutely brilliant. And you know, all these songs have been covered by a host of stars for the Beatles, to Johnny Cash, Stray Cats, The Animals, Robert Plant. You could go on and on and on, right? So, in Sun Studios itself, the talent that came through those, you know, doors, particularly in those early days, is just second to none. So I love it, but I'm not going to vote it in. Why? Because it's a bloody compilation. This ain't an album, right? Some of those songs actually were released on Elvis's first album. This isn't an album. This is a compilation. Compilations shouldn't be in this list. So it can do one.
Fighting talk there, John. Fighting talk.
It can do one.
It's a compilation. Chartbusters #3.
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest albums I've ever had. Great album.
What album's that, George?
If Complete Madness is on here.
Complete Madness, yeah.
Complete Madness.
I tell you what,
Hollow, the compilations.
I tell you what, mate, it's all up to us. We can do what we want. I do know that Bob Marley Legend is on the list as well, further down the line.
Okay, right. Well, that'll be getting the size 10s, yeah.
Poor Bob. It's a really good point, and we did say we would, you know, sort of challenge some of the list, and there is an argument as a compilation of the greatest hits, is it an album in the purest sense? So, yeah.
Not the purest
I don't think it is, because it's released 22 years after it was, you know, some of these songs were recorded, and so some of them.
If it'd been Elvis 56, John, would you be putting it in?
Well, if it was an album in its own right, I would be.
His first album, sorry, if it was.
100%.
Right. Okay.
100%. Love it. Love the songs, but this is a compilation, and it has no place in the list for me.
Excellent, George.
See, some of my favourite ever albums have been greatest hits or compilation albums. Honestly, it's just. I'm a pop man, so getting, you know, like as I say, Motown Chartbusters was having a couple of those albums when I was younger, or This Is Soul, that I borrowed from Auntie May and never gave back. Those albums to me were absolute game changers. And game changers is a phrase that we use quite a lot on Nothing Else Matters, but with regards to Elvis Presley and the recordings that he made at the time, I would say it's absolutely justified. I would take John's point on it. In the truest sense, it's not an album, but it's a collection of recordings made round about the same kind of time. So although it might not be technically an album, it is a collection of cuts by those three guys, Bill Black, Scotty Moore and Elvis Presley, recorded by Sam Phillips in that one wee incredible room with loads of slapback echo and no fucking drums, because DJ Fontana didn't arrive until 1955, I think. It's a white guy with a black sound. It's you can't, overstate how important this was in popular music and popular culture. Elvis Presley, they were talking about him last night at the Oscars. He's as relevant today as he was back nearly 70 years ago. I love the raw Elvis, the true, pure Elvis. His gospel and his R&B roots are right up there with his rockabilly roots. I just love these recordings. They're very, very pure, very honest, and they're crackling with intensity. And I don't feel sorry for Sam Phillips, because he sold the contract to RCA. He sold it, I can't remember, he sold it 35, 40 grand
50 grand or something, yeah.
50 grand. But what did Sam Phillips do with that 50 grand?
I don't know. What did he do?
He invested it in a little chain of hotels that had just started called Holiday Inn. So he made a fortune when he invested the money from Elvis into Holiday Inn, and he kept his own recordings. So I would put this in. I would make an exception in this case, and I'd make when it comes to later on in the conversation, I will put a couple of compilations forward and a couple of greatest hits forward, because some of those albums have been really important to me in my own personal top 100. A couple of them will be in. So I'm going to say for Elvis, despite John stamping his feet in the mud.
That's okay. That's why we're all on it together.
George, you're wrong and I'm right.
I was going to ask your view on live albums, but I'll just hold that one for a minute. Okay, that's maybe another.
I'll say I'm kind of a George in this, because for me, listening to this, and Christ, it was hard to find it to listen to.
Which I think probably backs up John's point. To a point, it's
maybe
not a de facto album. Yeah,
I did listen, and I think for me, it's just as George said, that's raw energy, and it's the spontaneity of a young artist, just finding his feet, using all his roots from gospel, blues, everything, and ending up with this amazing rockabilly. There's just something, I don't know, just energetic about it. It's almost like he's bearing his soul as he finds his voice. And it's really sad, because nobody knew the sort of sad trajectory that his career was going to take and his life was going to take after that. So, because I tend to really be drawn towards the music of artists when they really first start out. Like probably my favorite Beatles stuff is the really, really early stuff. When it's just dead raw, dead simple, pure, as George said. But I don't know about putting it in as top 100.
Well, I don't know if it helps at all, but at the moment, he doesn't have an album in the 100. If this goes out, there's nothing else coming up from Elvis, so we'll have to vote another one in at some point, which we can do. But the debut album is 332, Elvis in Memphis is 322 on the list.
It wasn't a big albums, man. It was more singles, really. It was, but it just seems a bit heresy not to have Elvis Presley in the top 100 albums of all time, considering he's like almost the fountainhead of rock and roll. He's not, people make claims that That's All Right Mama, his version of Big Boy Crudup's, blues tune, was the first rock tune, proper rock tune. But, you've got Ike Turner and Jackie Brenston from 1950 with Rocket 88. So they predate him by about 3 or 4 years. But I think you can't really, you can have the top 100 albums without having a guy who didn't really spend a lot of time doing albums. But this collection is just someone he doesn't know what's around the corner, and it's just natural and joyous and, almost spontaneous. It's life affirming listening to Elvis back then. And that's just listening to him. See, if you see him, it's like, fuck, you can't help but love the guy. So
absolutely. So I think, George,
you're called the king for nothing.
No.
Yeah, I think you're in, George, aren't you? You're a yes?
I'm a yes. And my dad met him. My dad's
right.
was he met him in Germany while they were both in the army at the same time. My dad was doing national service at the same time Elvis was, and he met Elvis in some fucking compound. So that was always his claim to fame, and he was even a fan of Elvis, but he met him. So
almost by association, you have to vote him in, George. Really,
I am actually related to Elvis by association. Yes.
And John, I think you were a bit unclear there, but I think you might have been a no. Is that right?
I think so, yeah. Just swing to a no on this one.
Yeah, can't even look at the camera. His rockabilly friends will be.
He won't sleep tonight, George. He won't sleep a wink.
I tell you what I will do. I'll bring in the Cramps album, A Date with Elvis. So Elvis will be there.
Perfect.
Is that the one with the cover that they're dressed up like Elvis on it?
No.
There's another album. It's a sort of punky album. It's sort of
Lisa, are you in or out? Well, John's away doing a search for us. What's your take?
I'm going to say in.
You're in.
Definitely in. I just absolutely love listening to those songs. There's just something about that energy there that I know it's a compilation, but it is what it is, and it's Elvis.
Well, I had no idea John was going to say that, but I've got a bit of an issue with the compilations as well. And I might be cutting my nose off here, George, because when you bring in the Immaculate Collection or whatever it is you bring in, I'll be, highly tempted to vote for it. But
it won't be that one.
At the moment,
the performance alone from the Sunset Sessions,
it's amazing. I'm just not sure it's an album. I think, I think if it came out, I think if it came out 54, I think if it came out 54, 55, I think it's an absolute slam dunk.
Yeah, I think it'd be top 10. Actually,
what's that?
If it was out as an album, I think you'd be like, that'd
be top 10. Yeah.
Because it's like the absolute epicenter of what came next. Without that, there can't be what came next. So
no, I get that as well. I think I might have the answer. So I'm probably going to say no at the moment, not for the songs, but more for the principle, I think. And that leaves us 2-2. However, we did say we would allow Twitter to do cast and vote when we had ties, and Twitter came in at 64% yes for this one.
Fuck all.
So, it's 64% idiots now.
Twitter. Thank you very much.
Is that everybody having an Elvis impersonation before we go?
This is the album. A Date with Elvis.
Right. Okay.
Right. Cramps.
Fantastic.
Right, okay.
It's coming in. It's coming in, John. Yeah.
Without Elvis, there's no Cramps.
Yeah, it could be on the way.
So,
John, you're a Cramps fan, aye?
Kept that one quiet.
I did.
I think they might come up again in the future. So we've passed it through. So, and I think maybe when we come back to recalibrate them, maybe the benefit of hindsight, that's maybe a good decision. I don't know. The only other stat I picked up before we move on, maybe just gives you the context of how big he was, and I'm sure you'll know this, but Ed Sullivan originally said he couldn't play on the show because he was too rude and stuff like that. But he played with somebody else's show, and of course Sullivan goes on to get him on, and
Alan, I think it was.
Yeah, that's right, mate. So he gets him on, and I think it's October '56. So his first album's pretty much just come out and what have you. But 83% of the TV audience in America watched the show, 60 million people. And if you know, whatever you think of that music, the ripples that must have came from that are, you know, unbelievable.
Now, here's the thing. Had there been mobile phones back then, and
They streamed it, wouldn't they?
how many streams would Elvis got? It would have been billions upon
Exactly.
billions, right?
Yeah. John secretly
maybe not as many as Drake, though, right?
John's secretly pleased with voting them in, George. I know he is.
Of course, yes.
Absolutely.
Should say so.
Okay, well, so we're 3 for 3. 77 was The Who. Who's next? So the comments are: Pete Townsend suffered a nervous breakdown when his planned follow-up to the rock opera Tommy, the ambitious theatrical Lifehouse, fell apart. But he was left with an extraordinary cache of songs that The Who honed for what became their best studio album, Who's Next. Won't Get Fooled Again, Bargain, and Baba Riley, all being with epic majesty, often spiked with synthesizers. I like synthesizers, Townsend said, because they bring into my hands things that aren't in my hands. The sounds of the orchestra, French horns, and strings. You press a switch and it plays it back to you at double speed. The Who, Who's Next? Lisa, do you want to jump off on this one?
Oh.
Go on.
Yeah, I think it's a great album. I really enjoyed it, but it's clearly got the big standout tracks are Baba O'Reilly, Won't Be Fooled Again, and obviously Townsend's what's his name? Pete?
Townsend.
Pete, just Pete.
Pete's new obsession with the synths really show up on there. Great tracks.
Okay. That's fine. Don't know.
I know that you lot love like loads of really articulate things to say about it, but
Really? No, not really.
I mean, I quite like the whole story about it, how it evolved, all the rest of it. And I mean, let's face it, who wanted another Tommy? I get bombarded with that for years.
Okay.
So I'm glad they made it into an album rather than like a rock opera.
Yeah.
And the front cover, what's that all about?
It's iconic, isn't it? The cover.
Oh, it's iconic.
Poor guys taking a piss.
Well, it's actually only one of them, is that right? Is that the story?
That?
I think there's only one of them actually took a piss on it.
All right, okay.
They had to use water because the rest of them
Frauds.
Yeah, it's Easington Colliery.
You can always pee.
What is it, John?
It's at Easington Colliery.
All right.
And my dad's uncle used to work there.
All right.
He didn't know Elvis, did he? Your dad's uncle.
He didn't know. No, he didn't. No.
What about like Roger Daltrey or someone? No.
Don't believe so. No. I think they were up for a day. He was on holiday or something that day.
Did they have a piss?
Sorry?
Did they have a piss on the obelisk?
Aye.
Well, we'll swing back to Lisa then. I'm sure she'll have a couple more comments.
I know I'm probably wrong about this, and I know it's been a really successful album and all the rest of it. But going back to what I was saying about Elvis or the Beatles, like with the Who, for me, it's the really raw stuff that they did in the beginning that really gets me, and maybe that's just my own experience of it. So by the time to this, I'm a bit kind of like, whatever.
Yeah. No, I disagree, to be honest. George?
Yes, see, I like Tommy, and I really like Quadrophenia. I like the big bold statement albums that they brought out. Yeah. Quadrophenia probably more than Tommy, actually.
I think David F. Ross said he thought Quadrophenia was the best album when we were doing some votes on it. I think he came on and said
a great album. Yeah. Tommy's probably got better songs. But like Lisa, I love the Who singles. The singles right up until probably about 69, 70. The singles were just outstanding. If you listen to a Who compilation album, John, their singles are great. They really are top notch. you get to the point, 1971, and they're starting to, expand and experiment, and it's very inventive sonically and lyrically, and it's probably their absolute peak as a playing band. It's probably as good as they sounded as a band, as tight as they were. But I think Townsend would have been listening to a lot of Traffic in the band and the Faces at the time when he recorded this. And Glyn Johns was the producer of the album, and he produced a whole bunch of those bands. So there's a lot of cross-pollination at the time, and you can feel it on this album. There are the 3 songs, obviously Baba O'Reilly, Won't Get Fooled Again, and Behind Blue Eyes. They become these big rock, monolithic epics that, basically draw up the groundwork for all the complaint rock that followed, like 25, 30 years later. It's interesting, but no interesting enough for me. There's a couple of good tunes that sort of slipped under the radar for me. This Song Is Over. I was really enjoying that one, and it sounded almost like a Joni Mitchell song until Daltrey sort of gets stuck into it and starts dragging it into like Yes territory. It's good, but it's no for me. It's probably, if a lesser band had made this album, it would be hailed as a masterpiece. But for the Who, it was like, yeah, it's good, but it's no Tommy and it's no Quadrophenia. So
okay.
It's interesting you mentioned Yes, because I kept thinking it's just Virgin in that kind of prog rocky kind of.
Yeah. I love Baba O'Reilly. Baba O'Reilly's like nothing. Hearing that in 1971 must have been like mind blowing. And I think Lifehouse, if he'd managed to get Lifehouse off the ground back then, it could have been a really interesting concept. But I suppose dipping into heroin and having a breakdown and stuff will sort of derail,
get in the
all
way.
your creative impulses. So, yeah.
I think to play devil's advocate for a second, talking about long albums and stuff earlier on, John mentioned it's 43 minutes long, this one, 9 tracks. I mean, it's almost sweet spot again.
Yeah.
And maybe that was what they needed to do, was not do another, hour-long 4-sided record, because they did live at Leeds, didn't they, the year
Live at
before?
Leeds as well. Yeah, Live at Leeds
That's
is
right.
great. It's so fucking,
Yeah.
that's almost like a punk record.
Yeah.
It's like really like the fury and the energy of, punk, albeit like 7-8 years before. But no, for me, I'd say no for Who's Next. And I don't like the cover. The cover's just a bit too fucking glib and no.
Wish.
They had a few other cover options, didn't they?
They did one in particular with Keith Moon.
And what was that one, John?
I was dressed up in black lingerie and a brown wig, and he was holding a whip.
Aye, what's Keith Moon for you?
Could have been any night, right? Yeah.
Probably a quiet night for him.
Absolutely. What's your take on it, John?
Well, I think the 2 songs that bookend this album, Baba O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again, bombastic rock opera bullshit, quite frankly. And I really struggled with this album till I got to side 2. And the first 3 songs in side 2, I think, are absolutely fantastic. Going mobile, really bluesy, psychedelic, sounding brilliant. Getting in tune, is it?
Yep.
Great piano going on in that one as well. I think Behind Blue Eyes, that's for me the best song on the album. And I think the concept of it did start off as a bit of a follow-up to Tommy, didn't it? It was another rock opera in Lifeboat, but that essentially got abandoned. But I think they got a number of the songs from this, and Glyn Johns is going, no, we can use these and just make it into more of a standard album. But I think it was, really acclaimed in 1971, featured in a lot of the, kind of polls, top album of the year. So,
there's so many
I just don't.
That year, though. That's a phenomenal year for albums.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely, yeah, yeah. But
absolutely.
I just don't think it's aged very well.
Is it that sort of
when you
prog
listen
rock feel to it, John?
Yeah, I just, I mean, we talk about some albums that, the Frank Ocean one, for example. What would you feel about that in 20 years' time? Will that age well? And you maybe expect that to be the case, but I don't think this one has. I think it's very much, I'm going to say, of its time, but I'd get the point around, particularly in the first and last song, the synthesizers getting used, which would, was pretty groundbreaking at the time, by all accounts. Yeah. But it's an okay album. I think, you talk about the album preceded it was live in Leeds, and that's probably up there as one of the best live albums of all time.
Yep.
Easily. But it's just a too bombastic in bits for me.
So I think your edging was a no, I think, John. Is that
100%. Yeah.
You're not edging, you are.
Yeah.
100%.
There is more chance of Pete Townsend finishing his research into that book he was writing than me voting this through.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Lisa, do you want to double back on your take on it before we...
I'm a no.
Yeah, I'm a no as well. I have a view of the Who that, they started off great and never got any better. 65, 66, and you should say, George, some great songs in between, they did stuff down the line, and, some amazing songs, but I thought they just got a bit too serious and pompous, and don't really call that, but
yes,
I kind of led, I'm not against it.
You're better off. Sometimes the sort of evolving as a band isn't always a positive thing. I think.
Yeah, but if you're Led Zeppelin, they started out like that, really, didn't they?
Start, keep doing that.
But they sound a bit to me like George says, the Traffic and that kind of early 70s stuff that kind of come in, and the sounds if they were kind of wandering into that, and maybe they weren't entirely sure why they ended up in that, but they were. Whereas Led Zeppelin were kind of in there anyway, and they kind of dipped in and out a little bit. So I'm not the biggest Zeppelin fan, but I think they were quite authentic at what they did. The Who just seemed to be jumping about a bit.
I don't know how I'll explain that one, but anyway, we'll
yeah, well, as I say, I'm a no.
A later date.
I think you're right, John. A couple of great songs on it. That I can't remember which one it was, but there's one of them sounds a lot like "Live and Let Die" to me. The McCartney song. Can't remember which one it is. I need to go back and try that again. But that picked me up. But I think we're 4 no's then. So is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm surprised at that, to be honest. Twitter was 54%. Yes, so we're against them on that one, but that's fine. A couple of quotes to finish on it. If you get any others, shout them out. There was the great one about touring America, and Moon was off his rocker and basically passed out on the drum kit during the gig, and Townsend has to call. Yeah, well, absolutely. But Townsend had to call out to the crowd and they play the drums.
Oh, I've seen the clip of that.
Yeah, and it's true. Guy comes up and plays 5 or 6 songs, and they carry Moon off, and they finish the rest of the gig and stuff, which I thought was quite interesting. I've got a couple of sort of comments here from Twitter. So I think, it's at Carol Jungle Boy, to give him his full title. So he mentioned, really like the podcast and whatever, and we're talking about the album, and he said, in passing, did you know that Keith Moon and Mama Cass both died in exactly the same flat at 9 Curzon Place, London, 4 years apart?
I've got a better one than that. And I can't save it because Boney M aren't in the. Boney M aren't going to get an album in this, right? I love Bobby Farrell, right, of Boney M. The guy, the dancer from Boney M.
Yeah.
The main guy.
Legend.
The basic king of the 70s. Let's forget Bowie and forget fucking Mark Bolan. Bobby Farrell was the genuine king of the 70s, right? He didn't sing on any of the records, all right?
That's right.
But he died on the same day, the same date, in the same place as the guy he sang about, Rasputin.
Wow.
He died in St. Petersburg on December the 30th, I think it is, and so did Rasputin.
Didn't know that.
There we are.
That's
I mean,
fucking better than Mama Cass and Keith Moon.
as
who
I'm
were
going
both
to,
pissheads. There you go.
we're playing trivia trumps here, aren't we? That's cracking. Didn't know that one. And
Yeah,
but
don't think we'll beat that one.
I don't think we will. The only other comment I had was from again one of the Twitter comments, which was from @Tony Schofield, and Tony loved the album, and he said I was there when they previewed material before choosing what went on the album.
I saw that.
So whatever you, so what must imagine what it must have felt like hearing those songs for the first time and all the magnificence. So, you know, whatever you think of the album now, you can imagine sitting listening in a studio in a playback or something, thinking, bloody hell, you know. So, he was 17, he said. So, so thanks, mate, for that, sharing that.
Lucky man.
But I'm sorry, it's out. So we need to find another one for you to tip into.
Did you
Okay.
listen to the other albums, Tony? If you
What's
did,
that?
let me know.
Absolutely. Maybe Tony's just a thing that he connects. Maybe he's in Superfly, which is our last record, right? Who knows? Okay, so one down. So that's the first one we voted out. Number 76 is Curtis Mayfield's Superfly. Right. Isaac Hayes' Shaft came first, but that record had one great single and a lot of instrumental filler. It was Curtis Mayfield who made a blaxploitation film soundtrack album that packed more drama than the movie it accompanied. Musically, Superfly is astonishing, marrying lush string parts to deep bass grooves with lots of wah-wah guitar. On top, Mayfield sings in his world-wise falsetto, narrating the bleak tales of Pusherman and Freddie's Dead, telling hard truths about the drug trade and black life in the 70s. I don't take credit for everything I write, Mayfield said. I only look upon my writings as interpretations of how the majority of people around me feel. Curtis Mayfield, Superfly. Who wants to lead off with the last one for tonight?
I loved it. I mean, I'm not really into sort of soul, funk, R&B, but I just thought it was a fantastic album. Really, really good.
Did you know the album, John?
No, didn't know at all. I mean, his voice is just incredible. Falsetto, just absolutely fantastic. And a lot of the lyrics as well, you know, you kind of listen to them and think, gee, you know, he's talking about drug abuse, poverty, crime, all of that kind of stuff. And you hear, let's say, some of the hip hop artists singing about similar themes, but probably in the more, shall we say, crude way. But this is just fantastic. It's, you know, from start to finish. I just really liked it. I thought the production was fantastic, really crisp, very clear. Freddie's Dead was just an amazing track. There was, I think there's only one person plays in the full up on every song. It's a guitar player called Craig McMullen. Because Curtis Mayfield, there's one song he doesn't appear on. I'm guessing it'll be one of the instrumentals. Not sure which one, but yeah, there's only Craig McMullen plays in the whole album, but it's the host of different personnel beyond him.
And what is he, just a session musician, John? Or
I'm not sure. Don't know the name. Don't know the name, but again, you know, I mean, even if you just think about Curtis Mayfield as well, some of, you know, who he's went on to, you know, Paul Weller's a huge fan. P.P. Arnold, Nile Rodgers, you know, people like them, take a lot, you know, for his music. Yeah.
Public Enemy said that he was really influenced by his use of the sort of street vernacular. That was the start of that for them.
Yep, I'd agree with all that. Yeah, I hadn't saw the film. I'd heard the soundtrack quite a lot, but I hadn't saw the film until pretty recently, to be honest. It's okay. It's just okay. I think for me, I thought the soundtrack's better than the film.
I would agree.
Yeah. So John, that sounded pretty positive. And Curtis Mayfield, are you a fan generally, or is this?
No, not really. No. I mean, I've obviously heard some of his stuff, but not someone of, you know, as I say, it's not the various genres. It's not something that I'll actively go and listen to.
That's good. You liked it, then.
But no, I did. So big thumbs up for me.
Brilliant. George?
No, I'm a fan of Curtis Mayfield. I love the stuff with the impressions. People Get Ready is one of my favourite songs of all time. It's just an absolute joy to listen to that song. It's one of those ones that can The lyric of it can move me to tears at times. I'm a fan of Curtis Mayfield. Whether it's his best album, you could argue that his debut, Curtis, 1970, might have been a stronger album, but I think this, in isolation, it works really well. You know, you can listen to this without knowing the movie. There's three really standout songs on it: Freddie's Dead, Pusher Man, and the title track, Superfly. Yeah. They're all great grooves, but they're really well arranged and well produced. And I think Isaac Hayes doing something similar with Shaft the year before opened up, the doors for a number of similarly socially responsible artists to jump in and do their bit. And Curtis was ideal for it. His guitar style is one of my favourites. It's very, he didn't play with a play. It was very strummy guitar style, very understated player, beautiful falsetto, really well judged lyrics. You're not going to get any criticism from me with this being in the top 100. I'm a fan of Curtis Mayfield. I feel very sorry for what happened to him towards the end of his life. I don't know if you're aware that he was almost killed in a tragic accident on stage when a lighting rig fell on top of him, and he was paralysed basically for the remainder of his life. But just an incredible talent, really talented fella between the impressions. And I'd urge you to go back and listen to the Young Mod's Forgotten Story and things like that from the impressions, and then work your way up, from Curtis and Curtis Live and Superfly. So yeah, Curtis Mayfield works for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, George. Lisa.
Yeah, I think like George said, it is a movie soundtrack, but I think on the strength of the songs and the musicality, it really does stand on its own as an album. I absolutely loved it. And I actually hadn't heard it before. I haven't seen the film. But yeah, I thought it was a really strong album. Really loved it.
Yeah, it's interesting that
where do we stand on soundtracks? Can I just put this in? Soundtrack. Where do we stand on soundtracks?
Because that's like compilation, right?
Right. It's not a compilation because he was asked to write the music for the film, and he's written the music. It's a fully fledged album. So it gets a tick in the box.
This one is right.
You're not putting Trainspotting in.
And there you go.
John, you know him too well, mate. You know him too well.
And Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. A bunch of them. Yeah. So again, Lisa, not something you would normally turn to, but you really liked it, I think, was it?
Like John, I have I do know Curtis Mayfield, but it's not something that I would always turn to put on. But I absolutely loved it. Totally funky, groovy. Of course, the lyrics are important as well. This is a commentary from him. But he didn't want to glorify, what was going on in the film, though. So it's very much his own songs, storytelling. It does tell the story of the film, but it's purely a commentary. Like seeing it from the character's point of view. He's talking directly to the characters. He's obviously very familiar with that kind of neighborhood himself. So I think it's a great album. I think it should be included.
Yeah, me too. As John mentioned earlier, I had no idea who he was until I heard the Jam cover them when I was young, and that was great. That was a sort of jumping off point to go back and listen to him.
The album was released before the film.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't know that. I know that was two of the songs were million sellers, so that was huge. Absolutely huge.
People went into the film, already knowing the songs, so they went in and were able to sing along. So that probably the album probably had a lot to contribute to the success of the film itself.
I did see one of the reviews of retrospective reviews that placed it. There was actually, they'd done it twice. They'd done it with two different sort of retrospectives. So one says that it was, you put Superfly, The Bollocks, and Saturday Night Fever, and says they're the three pop touchstones of the 70s, right? Question mark. And then another one said you put What's Going On, Superfly, and Inner Visions by Stevie Wonder, and that's the kind of social commentary trilogy, or whatever you want to call that. And I think it probably explains how great the album is. It can, it could even be thought to be put into these sort of two different lists at the same time.
Pieces of a Man by Gil Scott Heron in there as well.
Aye, could do. Absolutely. Maybe get them on the list, mate. And this is the only one at the moment. You're right, the Curtis debut it's a cracker, but at the moment, this is the only one that's on there. So, and I've got a bit of a kind of hot spot for this, because I don't know if there's any Isaac Hayes on the list, but I'm kind of hoping there is.
Soul has to be on. Soul.
If it isn't, George, I'll certainly be on my short list of ones that we're going to try and debate and put on, hopefully. It's fantastic.
Hot Buttered Soul is, there's Ike's Moods. As soon as you hear Ike's Moods, number 2, I think it is, you'll understand where Portishead got a lot of their sound from.
Yeah.
It's really influential.
So here's one of my, just to finish on that, actually. So, the guys talk about original songs that the covers better than the original, right? And there's always a kind of debate about it.
Loads. There's tons.
Yeah, there is tons, but I think talking on Isaac Hayes there, I think that when he covered Walk On By, right? So I think his version is better, although I love the original. I think it's better, and I also think the Stranglers version is better than it. I think he's got a double cover. So there, I'm going to leave you that one, George, because you're shaking your head there, mate.
Not a fucking see if Dionne Warwick is watching this, she will fly over tomorrow.
Listen, watch out, she's on Twitter, by the way, and she's here.
She will fuck you up, mate.
You're asking your Baccarat and David stuff, right? That's all that.
No, seriously, watch the Dionne Warwick documentary. She called all the heavyweight gangster rappers over to her house at 6 o'clock one morning. Suge Knight, Snoop Dogg, Tupac, all at her house. You better be there. And they all went in and she fucking tore strips off them. So even now, Snoop got that, when Miss Warwick calls, you fucking jump. So you watch yourself, mate.
I might edit this bit then. I'll reflect on that.
I'm going to send it to you.
You're going to get told to behave like Snoop Dogg.
Oh, mate, that's the story of my life. 37 minutes long as well. So, big tick for that, absolutely. Yeah. And my last comment on it before I think we're voting it in, was that he did get voted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 99, actually, not long before he passed. And he obviously couldn't attend because by this point he was sort of pretty much housebound. And the guys that were voted in on the same day, the guys that were inducted in the same one, were Billy Joel, George Martin, Dusty Springfield, Bruce Springsteen, and Paul McCartney.
Good company.
And Curtis Mayfield. So.
And the Staple Singers.
Sorry, John. Sorry. I couldn't read more writing there, mate. Thank you.
And the Staple Singers. Yeah, now you're talking.
And it says I've still got over 100 songs unreleased. Yeah, 100 songs are saying that, because he's got his own label, right? So, then there's still stuff that's not come out. So maybe one day, Cool. So that sounds like a really positive way to finish. Are we all in there?
Yep.
Brilliant.
Yep. All in. Groove-tastic.
So Groove-tastic. Thank you, John. So Sex Pistols was in. Who was out? Frank Ocean was in, which was great. Elvis went in through the Twitter cast and vote, and Curtis was in. Twitter was 68% for Curtis as well, so that was in anyway. Okay, so that was 4 we've added. I think you said a while back, George, that you thought as we went up the list, our strike rate might go up a little bit, because obviously the records should be getting better.
Higher quality, yeah. I'd be interested to know who's coming next. I can't remember who's on the list next. So who have we got next, Brian?
Thanks for teeing that up, George. So the next 5 we have are Aretha Franklin, Lady Soul; Kanye West, The College Dropout; My Bloody Valentine, Loveless; Neil Young Harvest, and Bob Marley Exodus.
He does.
So no compilations, no live records, no soundtracks, I don't think. So,
But Kanye.
Another interesting mix.
but we have Kanye, absolutely. So I'm sure we're all
Get in the
looking
room.
forward to that eagerly.
Yeah, I look forward to that as well.
And,
So,
and an album that nearly bankrupted Creation Records.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But what a sound, right? So we'll save that for next time. Brilliant. Have we missed anything, guys? Are we good for that?
No, that sounds good to me.
Lovely.
Happy days.
Thanks for all your input as ever. Massively enjoyable. And we'll be back doing the next one pretty soon. So thanks everyone for watching and listening as well. So until next time, stay safe,
Get
everyone.
up, you all.
Get
Get
out.
out of here.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.